So we need to talk about parents that didn't necessarily kick their children out of the house, but never trusted their children enough to give them access to the house. So if you would fall in that category if your parents put locks. If there was a lock on the door and you didn't have the key to actually get in the house, but also there are other parents that, put locks on things within the house, such as refrigerators and, cabinets and, things that contain food items and other things, which is, I don't know what state you guys are in, but I know it's illegal in a lot of states to actually do that. And so I want to respond to Miss Eartha Litt's comment. She said her mother didn't kick me out, but refused to give her a set of keys to get into the apartment. She was 16 and had to come home by herself. No explanation why she lived with someone else, but she could not get into the house and may be locked out for all hours until someone came home. And that is also a common phenomenon. That is an abuse tactic. That is something in which parents use to control their children, where, they don't let them in. They don't let them have the responsibility of coming home. And a lot of parents who do this do it under the guise or under the notion that I don't trust my kids. If I let them come in, they may have boys or whatever, and things like that. That is a parenting issue. And so it's a parenting issue if you can't trust your children enough to allow them to supervise themselves, especially as they become of age. And that is something that needs to be addressed more thoroughly. But having a child that's locked out and has nowhere to go is no excuse. And so that is something that, you actually need to make the effort, and maybe even go to a licensed mental health professional and work on that discipline, structure, order, responsibility, trust, those types of key words. And again, this is general. I'm giving out general tips, so I don't know everyone's situation. So everybody can have a different situation. But also too, parents that put locks on foods and things like that. Here in the state of California, it's actually illegal to do that. And I know that because I worked in group homes many, many years ago. I worked in group homes with adolescents and children, at-risk youth. And one of the things they did at this facility was they put locks on the food, and they would put locks on everything. And community care licensing, which is the governing body that overlooks all of those facilities like that, they came in there and they got in big trouble for that. And so it's one of the things where we actually had to go through training. So you can't restrict or deny access to children from food and other things like that they need for well-being. So you can't ration out food. You can't put locks on doors and things like that, And so if you were to go to a licensed mental health professional and disclose that information, that's actually something that can be reported to the Department of Children and Family Services for a child abuse and or neglect, because children, the way that the governing bodies look at it is children are always supposed to have access to food. There's no good reason to cut children off from food. That's pretty much how they look at it. Like, even if your children overeat and things like that, again, they consider that to be a parenting issue, where that's something that you actually need to sit down and work with children about diet and things like that. But children should not be restricted from things like that. Children should not be restricted from things like the bathroom. Children should not be restricted from things like electricity, running water, and things like that. Those are actually reportable offenses, and people can get into trouble for that, which is why it's always a big no-no. Like if you're a parent and you have children and your lights get cut off and things like that, those are things that again, could be looked at like your house is uninhabitable or it's not safe for a child. So locking children away from things, with the exception of weapons and things that could actually hurt them, but like restricting them from access to navigate around their home, again, is a means of control. And, you know, it's not something that I'm going to go back and forth, because I'm sure there's going to be someone that comes up there, well, you know, so I'm not going to go back and forth about that. But I'm just talking about my experience and what I know. And it's okay if you want to share your experience and talk about it. But yeah, it's not good to lock children out of their homes. It is a safety and security issue. You lock your children out, or your children don't have access to get home, you know, they can get hurt when left outside to all of the elements. Not only that, but if you don't trust them inside the home, what do you think is going to happen to them outside of the home, where anybody can run into them, anything could happen? They could get picked up, they can start mingling with other people that necessarily aren't good for them to be hanging around, you know, so the logic doesn't really transfer there. And, you know, the exception, again, there's always like some exceptions to rules in some cases. But, you know, if your children are like a safety and security issue, like your children are doing drugs or stealing from you, or, you know, they're violent and things like that. So, again, there's those things. But just generally speaking, if you just want to have control and not, you don't trust your kids, you don't want to allow your kids to have access to the home when you're not there supervising, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.